Welcome to the Hospitality Unsettled podcast, a podcast focused on new insights and perspectives, all within the lines of hospitality. Each week, we explore and discuss viewpoints from students and experts and try to bring you a new perspective on the hospitality industry. I'm your host, Tom Berlofs, and welcome to Hospitality Unsettled. This episode, we're exploring the relationship of COVID-19 and the overall sustainability of the hospitality industry. That and more in this episode of the Hospitality Unsettled podcast. To give you that perspective, I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Joe Guiver. Joe, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. Before we start, may I ask you to briefly introduce yourself?
I'm a lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire, and my background is transport and tourism. And I'm particularly interested in sustainability.
I was going to say, yeah, most people, when I say briefly, they go on and on, but that was, fantastically brief. So why do you think that it's so important to talk about this topic today, the topic about sustainability of hospitality in the current situation?
Well, for years, many of us have been pulling our hair out about the way the world is crashing towards climate change. And it's been estimated that we've got 3 to 5 years to act. And yet all the indications are that we're willing to say we'll act, but we don't do anything. And then suddenly this a major threat to so many people's health has proven that we can act. We can actually stop the airlines. We can stop a lot of unsustainable practices. And tourism itself has stopped virtually everywhere. And I'm very anxious that when we start rebuilding, when we get over this crisis, we don't try and get back to business as usual. Because if we do, we'll be heading for another major global disaster. Most of us will not survive that.
May I ask you, where did that perspective or ideology originally come from?
What do you mean for me?
Yeah, for you, because it's something that we don't hear very often. So I'm curious as to what's brought you to the point where you are now, plus the research that you have done and continue to do into this subject.
Well, it's been a lifelong interest, and way before they kind of found out about climate change, I always wondered what harm we were doing by burning things that had taken millions of years to develop inside the earth. That there must have been some destabilizing effect of using fossil fuels. And in some ways I was quite relieved when we heard about climate change, but that's way 20, 40 years ago now. And just all the time we've been on this disastrous path towards global climate change. And even now when we're seeing what is happening, we've had extreme weather events across the globe. Everybody's saying yes, but we can't stop people traveling. And we have proven we can stop people traveling. And already we're beginning to hear the birds and see the fresher air, smell the fresher air. So we've really just got to take this opportunity to make things change.
So the question is not whether or not that we can, but whether or not that we want to, and how we want to continue after, we sort of restabilize, for lack of a better word, maybe.
Yeah, but there's a lot of forces that want business as usual back. And who've previously, they've doubted that climate change exists, doubted that tourism had many emissions, and all the time they've prevaricated and delayed action and never questioned whether growth and tourism were good things or not. And now we've got time to consider it, and we really have to, when we start some recovery, do it so that it doesn't threaten our world again.
Well, you have an academic background. Do you think that also creates a different perspective, that academic and commercial side in that sense conflicts about this topic?
Yes, definitely. I think as academics, we're privileged and we're allowed to take an overview, whereas if you work in a company, you've got to be competitive, you've got to push, you've got to make your company the best. And we're all, people in the commercial world have to fight for that, even when they see that the actions in that competition are not for the better good of humanity or the environment.
So it's difficult to ask from you any advice for business leaders, but what is done in the academic community to further strengthen, well, to support this cause and to create more awareness?
Yes, but I think we've got to be very careful, because companies always claim that they're being sustainable, and Hall particularly distinguishes between eco-efficiency and sustainable consumption. And if you believe the airlines, they're the most eco-efficient they can be, and they're carrying more people per gallon of litre of fuel and so on, but all the time they are increasing the number of people, they are increasing the amount of fossil fuels they're using. They might be highly efficient about it, but all the time they're using more fossil fuels, emitting more greenhouse gases and changing the climate, and they're not willing to look at it. And in fact they can't. If you're an airline and you're trying to please your customers, you're trying to please your shareholders, how can you question the existence of aviation? And that's where academics do have a privileged position and say, you know, you can't be a sustainable airline. It's not possible.
Well, from this perspective, it seems that there's, well, no way out, because one side doesn't want to recognize this because, well, I don't want to call it's bad for business. And at the same time, the academics, well, they're in a privileged position, and it's easy to, from the sidewalks, to criticize what's being done there because, well, there's no damage done from their side.
Yes, but I think we have to think wider than just businesses. And it's been quite interesting watching how a lot of governments have come in to support businesses. How we arrange our economy is only one way of organising society. And surely after this, we have got to say, no, we need to organise society, not for the benefit of businesses, but for the benefit of people. And sometimes that means that some businesses will fail and have to readjust. But as long as those people then find fulfilling jobs or fulfilling existences, we don't need even to think about employment all the time. Our economy should be an instrument for improving well-being, not us being servants of that economy.
Nice. Well, one thing that I really like that you said is very often we put the climate and ecology at the center of this discussion, but you put people at the center by saying the economy and everything should serve the well-being of people. Could you further elaborate on how you see that?
Well, I mean, obviously the planet, even if you take a really selfish humanity view, it's in our best interest to maintain the place where we live. Without a planet, without an environment, there will be no human life. And as Al Gore said, you know, if some people see it, the economy versus the environment, but no environment, no economy. So I think it's in our own best interest to preserve that environment. And at the moment we're trashing it, we're filling it through full of plastics, we're killing the bees we rely on. You know, you can just look on anything. Well, yeah. And climate change is the most immediate and the largest problem we are facing. And if we can't pull our fingers out and do something about that and reorganize society for the long term, I think we're lost.
So could you give any indications? Well, me as a young individual, but I presume there's many like me who deep down, like you said, they know it, but question, okay, so then what? What do we do?
Well, one thing, I think, you know, Greta Thunberg has shown the power of youth. And it's us oldies juggling with your future. So you really got to say, no, we've got to reorganize differently. I see a lot of hope for young people, is that we don't have to be fixed on the world of work for our identity. I see more and more people saying, well, I like painting, I like making music, that we can find satisfaction and in our leisure and in our work life from less resource intensive activities. and we don't always have to be in the rat race. So we must get promotion. We must get more money. We've got to stop that. And I think that way we'd lead more fulfilling lives.
And do you think that's also has been one of the reasons that brought us to this point, that because we said economy first, on the first place, that, well, everything became subservient to that economy?
Yes, I mean, we follow GDP. We've got the triple bottom line, and we've got environment, society, and economy. Well, why have we got economy there? Economy's part of society. So actually we're overweighting people in terms of the environment. Why don't we just have society and environment? The economy, we can survive without an economy. We can't survive without an environment. So let's rethink our economy, and let's reorganize so that we protect and not trash the environment.
Okay, so let's say, Joe, we make you very influential in the business world or in the academic world. What would be some of the things that you say, okay, that's where I would put my attention to?
I've really been caught with different measures of well-being, so that not just using GDP as a measure of well-being. We know that doesn't work. All the research is that where you get great inequality, there's lower levels of well-being by all the measures, divorces, criminals, and so on, both for the wealthy and the poor. I also think we should be looking at a shorter working week so that we rebalance work and leisure and family. And I also am interested in whether we can bring in universal basic income so that people are paid for being, and then can make more money if they want, which is taxed. And at the moment, we've got so many people in culture, artists, musicians, comedians, actors, who are putting so much into the public realm without any pay at all. And it makes us realize how much we value them, but there isn't necessarily a mechanism to pay them properly. And I think universal basic income would redress that a bit.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think sort of the key term is metrics, is how do we measure success or wealth?
Yeah, I think we've got over, there are metrics for happiness and so on. I think we've gone overboard on metrics, and we all know that sometimes when you're given a target, it forgets some of the less tangible things like trust and friendship and pride in one's work. So I do think we need to step back a bit from metrics. They're all so easy. And the people that developed GDP said you can't rely on it. It's only a rough indicator. And yet we've become slaves to it. And we measure not only where we are in the competition between nations, but we keep on wanting growth. And we've stopped explaining it. We just say we've done very well because we've grown by X%. That's not necessarily a good thing. We've got to question that.
So if people want to question that, where can they find relevant information, or where should they go to further build up the knowledge to challenge these views?
There's certainly quite a lot of literature about happiness indexes, and I'm happy to send you some websites about that. We've been working, just piloting ways of measuring well-being. Not particularly, we can't say, if somebody scores high on that, they have greater well-being, but they are subjective measures. But what you can test with that is with different circumstances, do people feel happier or less happy? And there's different kinds of well-being as well. There's hedonic, which is, this kind of short-term, avoid pain, and there's eudaimonic, which is a more long-lasting satisfaction, resilience in life. And it's quite difficult to get those two measured together. It's always going to be subjective, but we often know what's right and what's wrong and what suits us and what doesn't. And I think we need more sophistication in measuring those.
Well, my first question is then, how do we get to that more sophistication? But I'm not sure if you would have the answer.
There's not a perfect answer, and if you look for metrics, they're always biased in one way or another. But we can do better than we're doing at the moment with just economic growth. And I say there are these measures of happiness, and I'll send you the websites for.
Yeah, the happiness index I know in the small country of Bhutan, if I'm not mistaken.
Bhutan, yes.
Bhutan, sorry, yes,
yes.
Bhutan, exactly.
Yes, yeah. And it's not perfect. Nothing will be perfect,
no.
And things will change. The moment you put in a metric, people want something different. But at least we don't have to be hooked on economic growth, because look where it's landed us.
So how confident are you that some of the ideas you suggest and the discussion that we have now as well, that some of these effects will be long lasting and will be changed in the upcoming months, let's say during the end stages of the virus?
Not very confident at all. It's really the corporations, the neoliberal governments are going to be fighting for business as usual. And that's why I really feel we've got to make our voices known. I mean, our government was sacking nurses, refused to pay them, was dismantling our health service, which is why we are much worse prepared than other countries. They've suddenly backtracked on that, and there's no argument about it. So I hope we can go with that flow and make it better, like people did after the Second World War, when we got our health service. We got a lot of really good measures that helped everybody in the country, not just the rich. So we do need to apply pressure from now on to make things change, because it's certain the ones who were the winners in the previous system will resist and fight back as fiercely as they can.
So, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind me is, do many of us not realize that there is this conflict between these two sides, that the winners, that I don't want to say that we're fighting against, but that we're indeed trying to push back against the winners of last time without us realizing that we should create that pushback?
Yeah, I think there has been a pushback, and Greta Thunberg is my hero, and it's been growing, and particularly among young people. But we've just got to make sure that is heard loud and clear at the time when people say, "Whew, we've got over the virus," or it's beginning to end. Let's start up what we used to have.
Okay, so Joe, if I may ask you now, then go ahead, give an inspirational speech, give something to play when this is all over. What would that sound like?
Let us all consider our every action. Do we need plastic? Do we need fuels? Do we need to travel so far? And let us question everything. And where can we get satisfaction? Do we need worldwide tourism to help us relax because we've got such intensive jobs? Well, maybe the answer is to reduce the intensity of those jobs. We're at the moment closed in with our loved ones, but are far away from many loved ones and really afraid of losing them. And we need to treasure that. What is life about? It's about human belonging, human caring for one another, whether close to us or far away.
That was beautiful. Do you think we've lost that in tourism? That connection, that caring, and that it has been commercialized to a point where, yeah, the essence is still there, but yeah, not in the original fashion.
Yes, some tourism. I mean, the trouble is,
exactly. It's
researchers always talk about international tourism, and I'm not quite sure of the figure, but I think it's only 1/8 of tourism. There's an awful lot of low-key local tourism that happens that people find fulfilling. Particularly in the Netherlands, I think I found. One of your researchers found a holiday where people actually use less energy on holiday than they did at home. So they should have a much longer holiday. They were camping and cycling. Yep. We know how to do it. Let's get back to nature. Let's rediscover our own countries. I do think the kind of selfie social media, you know, that kind of creates a one-upmanship that people feel forced to follow. But I've talked to people and asked where they're going on holiday, and they've named a town. I said, "Oh, which country is that in?" "Oh, I don't know." So it's and often it's a destination that offers, fun and frolics and drink and lots of young people together, but it doesn't really matter where it is. We don't have that sense of place.
So why do you, that makes, because I completely understand your point, but why do you think that's the case?
I think we do look for escapism, and and I think that's any way of life we do that, particularly young people. But then we can teach people how to get a deeper sense of satisfaction and deeper understanding of themselves through different kinds of holiday. Without, it doesn't have to be all consumer goods and consumption.
Nice. So if you want to know more about some of the research that Jo has done into the subject and some of the recommendations that she makes regarding the literature, we'll post those in the show notes. And if you would like to know more about how to plan a cycling holiday, then you can contact me. Was there anything else that you'd like to add, Jo, before we close off?
No, I think that's fine. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Then that's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully we'll be. Hopefully we have inspired some other people, and let's say in a few months, I'll see if I can separate the inspirational quote and see if we can spread that across the web to make sure that we push back.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, listener, as well, for joining us for this episode of the Hospitality Unsettled podcast. I hope that we managed to unsettle your views on sustainable hospitality, and that you'll be joining us for your future episode of our student-driven podcast. If you would like to share your viewpoints on the topics discussed or take part in a future episode on a concept related to hospitality, then you can contact us via the website at www.hospitalityunsettled.com. There you can also find previous episodes of the podcast. And lastly, if you want to stay up to date about the topic we'll be discussing next week, you can follow us on Instagram at Hospitality Unsettled. My name is Tom Berloves, and you've been listening to the Hospitality Unsettled podcast.